Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, from the onset, allow me to thank the Honorable Engineer Muriuki Karue, the father of CDF, for having reflected on the dynamics of the Kenyan politics, both immediately after independence, after the advent of multipartyism, and before the promulgation of the current constitution. Madam Speaker, for those of us who are in Parliament, at that particular time when the government used to be here, there were three things that used to dominate the flow of the House. A member of the back bench will ask a question to a senior minister on a development project in his constituency. And the answer used to be, these projects will be funded when funds are available. And I want you to note, when funds are available. That is the first thing that motivated Engineer Karue. Remember that particular time also, our politics, as usual, was tribal, regional, and with all its characteristics. And meaning, therefore, when you are on the other side of the government, development was highly politicized. And therefore, the Honorable Engineer Karue decided to politicize development in its entirety. That's why he brought CDF. And greatly, I'm privileged to have represented two constituencies, the larger Wajir West and the last constituency. But before even I go that, the third component that characterized the 8th Parliament and before was also Parliament was an appendage of the executive. So we had three things, and I want to tell colleagues who are new to the House. Remove the Parliament from the ambit of the executive, bring it to within the domain of members of Parliament themselves. We succeeded in forming PSC. That was the first attempt. The second attempt was to erase that phrase of funds. These projects will be done when funds are available. We brought that aspect to the members themselves through NCDF. And the third thing, Madam Speaker, was to set ourselves, the truth shall set us free, to allow ourselves, members of Parliament who have been demeaned at that particular time. You know the history? Every Thursday, members used to congregate somewhere, and you know the corners. That has also been removed. I want to tell you today, this is your time, and I want to thank also the Honorable Otene Amolo, the Honorable Chepkonga, and all the other great brains who have persistently pushed for this constitutional amendment. Madam Speaker, every parliament has its own history. You know it, you have been around now, this is your third term. The history of this parliament will be judged by the passage of this constitutional amendment. If we don't pass this, and I will tell you, Madam Speaker, there are caucuses who have contributed hundreds of millions to fight these amendments. And I want members to hear this. There are caucuses that have contributed tens of millions to fight four things. To fight equalization, they have succeeded. Equalization is no more. And even those of us who fought for the inclusion of that particular clause today, we are ashamed. 12, 13 years after the promulgation of the current constitution, there is nothing tangible that we can say is a product of equalization in our regions. The second bit, Madam Speaker, out of ignorance, they have decided to fight NCDF. And I'm glad that Honorable Amolo has alluded to this. I want to ask them wherever they are. NCDF is not going to get even a fraction of the devolved funds. It's going to get, the allocation is already provided, the formula is already provided for. The third thing that they have done, they are against the empowerment of our county MPs, the NGAF. What is more important than empowering our county MPs? They represent constituencies, and the framers of the current constitution were not fools to have special seats for our ladies. Those who are fighting the enactment of these are, remember, they are fighting the majority of the Kenyan voters who are the women. The third thing, Madam Speaker, is to create an illegal niche for one of the houses. That doesn't, it will only come. I am a fervent supporter of the Senate. But we must also support and believe in the constitutional role of each of the houses. We shall not allow anybody to demean the role of the National Assembly, just like we will not allow anybody to demean the role of the Senate. That is constitutionally enshrined. Madam Speaker, the other bit that we must also understand is why did we move, in the governance history of this country, we have had different stages of attempting to decentralize development. When you decentralize development, Madam Speaker, there are a number of things that come to the fore. One, we have political decentralization. We also have administrative decentralization. We have the DOs and this. In the politics, we also have the counties. But we have economic decentralization, Madam Speaker. And this is one area that also CDF also comes in. And what is the essence of this, Madam Speaker? Is to do away with something called disintermediation. Meaning, therefore, the different layers, and you can see the level of corruption, the level of incompetence, the level of bureaucracies, to remove that intermediation, Mr. Speaker, so that the CDF funds go direct from the national coffers to the constituency. And that spurs development, that brings about equity, that brings about development. And I want to ask you members, can you imagine, just reflect on your constituency, and I will tell you this. I was a young member of parliament when I was first elected, on an opposition ticket during the Kanu time. My constituency then, Wajir West, didn't have even a single secondary school, Madam Speaker. It took me almost a year through Harambes to come up with a first secondary school. But since then, you can see it's obvious. Through CDF, you get the same development. I want to ask you, and I want this to go also on record, those members of the current National Assembly who will not be available for the passage of this constitutional bill, as the father of this house, I shall take the trouble of naming you and shaming you as people who are not pro their constituency development. We want you to cancel all your assignments wherever you are. Come and vote for this critical motion that will continue to empower the local people. Madam Speaker, I want to say this. CDF or NCDF remains the most popular development agenda in our country. And that has clearly been demonstrated by the public participation. Who is anybody else to fight NCDF? It is our time now, as the Honorable Omolo has rightly put it, to put this in perspective so that these obvious litigants, Madam Speaker, and it's their right to go to court, will also appreciate that the legislative powers of the people of Kenya rest with Parliament, the National Assembly. And this must also be supported, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other thing, there are people who are trying to equate. There's a policy called the pork barrel policy in America, in the Congress. Ignorant people who do not understand the legislative history of Congress have equated NCDF to pork barrel policy in Congress. No, I want to tell them and I want to educate them. The pork barrel policy came up as a result of the end of the Second World War, Madam Speaker. It's one of the tools the congressional great minds have used to allow the member, a congressional person, leader, to have certain oversight funds at their disposal, not managed by the congressional leader, but managed by that office to deal with certain emerging pertinent issues in that particular congressional district. But CDF is completely different. CDF is not managed by the Member of Parliament. The Member of Parliament remains just the MP for the constituency. But this is managed by an entity, a legal entity called the National CDF Board, through their own structures. Where does the Member of Parliament come in? And therefore, there's no correlation, there's no semblance between pork barrel policy in Congress and NCDF. And those who want to equate this are ignorant of the history of Congress, are ignorant of the history of NCDF, and are also have not applied their minds to the true intention of NCDF, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other bit that we must also understand is that we are politicians. I am a politician in every aspect. I think politics, I sense politics, I reflect on politics, Madam Speaker, and I act politically. Nobody shall intimidate you. If you are allowed to be intimidated, then you are in the wrong field. Can you go back to your farm and become a farmer? If you have opted to be in this field, make sure you stand for the right of your voters. And that is the only thing that when time comes, you either exit or you decide to do other things, you will be remembered by your conscience that this is what you have contributed. Madam Speaker, finally, I represent a constituency called, and you know it, you have been around, called Elders. It's almost, it was created at the same time when also devolution came in. I want to challenge the role, the critical contribution NCDF has made to my constituency Elders and what the devolved funds have done. And when you put the same on a scale, you will give NCDF 99.9% and you will give the role of the devolved funds 1%. Can that be substituted? The answer is no. I stand here to support this critical amendment and urge you, wherever you are, come out from your cocoons, support this amendment this afternoon so that tomorrow it goes to the president,
Very well. Honorable Irene Mayaka.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also stand to support this particular amendments, which includes Section